what is it, why it's important, and how to do it on a practical level as well. I don't know if many of you here in the call have done UX research. Are you more in design or engineering? I saw in Slack channel there were different backgrounds, so I'll keep it on a general and good level so that everyone follows. And if you don't, feel free to raise your hand and tell me, and I'll explain it more in depth. So first of all, a big hello. I'm Vaida, and I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden. So for me, it's almost evening and afternoon. And I'm a UX researcher and designer at Electrolux. I'm also a mentor at the ADPList community. I encourage you all to join it. It's super cool. I also love writing, and I have a blog called UX Fika, where I tell stories about other UX designers, researchers. My background is in communications and multimedia. And I'm also super passionate about behavioral design, psychology, how basically our brain works, and trying to understand it and apply it in the UX work that I do. And on the side, I'm building a mini personal leadership program to also let people outgrow themselves and learn more soft skills in design and research. But today is not about me, today is about UX research. And so let's jump into it. And I want to cover some important topics today. Explain what is it, how I do UX research as well to inspire you, and share some practical methods of how to do UX research. I'll show you methods that I think you can apply during this weekend so that it's relevant for your projects as well. And last but not least, we're going to talk about UX research mindset. So it's a very important topic of how to grow this healthy mindset and also apply it not only in hackathon or designathon, but any of the everyday work as well. And then, of course, Q&As that we can jump in and ask some questions. Of course, I want to make it interactive. So ask, comment, share, react with some reactions that you have in Zoom. It's a cool feature. And I want to make it useful for you. So let's jump into it. First, as a start, I want to say that we as designers have a super big power, and with power comes responsibility, because every delightful but also frustrating experience comes because of a series of decisions that we make as designers. And that's super important to understand and to also acknowledge the bigger picture of what we do as designers. And on every day, we try to solve problems, address user needs, find a way to solve a specific challenge that we have. We all have to figure things out. But how do we do that? Well, we do that by doing research. And by doing research, we identify different patterns and develop empathy for our users and the customers. But research could mean many things. In design world, there's so many types of research: design research, consumer research, marketing research, usability research, UX research. So let's step a bit deeper and understand what is UX research. And I know that you might have some questions right away. So feel free to jump if I also say some terms that sound not clear. What is UX research? Well, when I was small and I'm the 90s kid, I still remember when software or products used to come in boxes. Still remember my dad bringing me Windows in a box, or antivirus in a CD, or music in a cassette, or a game in a CD. And somehow the products felt a bit more static. It felt like it had an end state, even though I knew there's going to be update or I can update it. But having it in a physical box felt much more static. But today we build products that are continuously updated, that we continuously iterate, that we continuously optimize. And I don't feel as a user that the change. It happens almost automatically. It almost happens in the background, in invisible stage, that it just happens. And we notice, oh, here's a new feature that Zoom introduced, and now you can see transcriptions, for example. So today, the design is more iterative as well. And digital products, especially, there are three important parts. There's technology. So digital products have to be feasible technically. There's a business side of the product as well. So it needs to have a viable business model. And there's third part, it's about desirability. So digital products have to solve real user needs and add value to their lives. And that's very important in UX research. And how do we build desirability? Well, we do that by doing UX research. So UX research, for me and in my perspective, is a systematic and ongoing investigation of users and their needs and requirements in order to add insights to the process of designing applications, products, services, or whatever the final product is. And how do I do UX research? I want to look at a few examples and show you some practical work as well. And just for those that don't know Electrolux or the company, it's a global appliance company. It's been here for 100 years. We also have one brand in US that's called Frigidaire, that's connected fridges. Maybe you would know that. I work with products that, well, 100 years ago, they look one way. Maybe today they look a bit different, but it's amazing to see how some of the things don't change and some of the things are completely different than 100 years ago. And my role is a UX researcher in IoT department. So I do build digital products for connected appliances like air purifiers, air conditioners, robot vacuum cleaners, etc. And I work in a multidisciplinary team together with product designers, developers, testers, and we all work together to build this good user experience and care about our users. And that's what I always try to do, to advocate for the users, that it's not only my call, but it's also all the team's call when building products. And when I do research, I try to address certain goals. Sometimes I want to learn something about the users. For example, how do people map their home with robot vacuum cleaner? I want to understand it so that we build a feature that works. Sometimes I want to solve a very specific problem. For example, people complain about scheduling functionality in the app. Something doesn't work right. They're not happy. How do I solve this? How do I research the best way to address that problem? Sometimes I just want to and need to execute. So we need to launch our app in China the next month. Okay, what do we need to do to achieve that? Sometimes I'm iterating. For example, some buttons or the icons on the oven are not clear for the users. We need to adjust it, change it, make it more understandable. And sometimes also just listen and observe and watch how people are using things, shadow them to observe and get more deeper insights into their behavior and their needs. And I know, like in your guide, you also are familiar with double diamond model, and all these goals for me connected a little bit to the double diamond model as well. That sometimes there are different stages within our projects where we have to do different type of research. For example, when we are exploring the problem at the beginning, we need to understand what are users trying to do, why are doing this way, what's hard for them currently. When we are deciding what to fix, maybe we want to understand and ask what's the most high impact problem for our users. When we test potential solution, we actually validate and see, does our product or our proposal fix the problem? Does it actually help? Sometimes we want to also refine the final solution and validate, do all users understand it? Does it make sense? Is it good? Is it what we wanted to achieve as well? So I also encourage you to think about these different stages and think about the methods that are the best for different stage. And the method depends on a number of factors. It could be, as I said, the stage of the project that you're in, or it could also be what information you already know about the users, their context, and their needs. Sometimes there's already a lot of pre-existing research that you can also use to your advantage and to get informed. So how can you do UX research at the Catalyst Designathon? And I want you to really encourage you to explore the problems that you're investigating, to understand the users and their needs, and to also iterate of that knowledge that you get in a short period of time, but I'm sure that it's definitely possible. And I think it's possible by doing just enough research. I love this term, just enough research. And what it means is getting enough information to move on and to progress and to make a decision of how to actually solve a problem. And a good recommendation, and it's not my term, it's a term by Erica Hall and her great book, Just Enough Research. So maybe after this designathon, when you are more rested, you want to read something good about research, this is definitely a book that I would recommend to read. So I cannot travel physically to Boston and go through a journey of what UX research is, but I'll try to take you on a mini journey now and explain what could just enough research actually mean for digital products. And I will go through a few examples. But before that, I want to say that once you start tapping, your UX research, it could look like a deep forest. It could be so many methods, so many things to choose, and I don't want you to be scared. It's a normal thing for me every day to keep learning, to keep understanding. I haven't tried this tool or this method. Let's try it for this, or continuously learn. And I think that's something that we as designers have and will always have, because design and UX is constantly changing, and so do users' needs. So don't get overwhelmed. And today we're going to go through 4 methods that I wanted to explain. So good user interviews and how to start with user interviews. Then we're going to talk about the usability test and how can you do usability test. We're going to check the right test that I'm not sure if some of you know. If you do, maybe you can give me thumbs up or thumbs down. And then we're going to talk about gorilla test that is very suitable for hackathons, designathons, and I used it many times myself when having short period of time. User interviews. So I start very consciously on this method because I think it's very important reason to do, and you should talk to your users. Try to understand how they co-live the products, what are their challenges, their needs, and I try to do that regularly at my work. I have a goal of how many users I want to talk a month, and I try to always achieve it and learn from them. Always be curious about what the users say. And a simplified form to do it could be, like you said, an objective. What do you want to achieve with this interview? You prepare a mini script. You recruit or find users. It could be your friends and family also in this context of the designathon. Set up logistics, call, invite, compensation. That's more if you do research at work. But of course, you can simplify it for this weekend. You interview them and synthesize and make sense. And this synthesize and make sense is a big part of doing interviews well. And when I do interviews, I follow this TED model of how you can ask questions that open up people to share and to talk. So you can always ask questions like, tell me more, tell me how, take me through. It's quite general, broad, but it lets people open up. You can also say, explain how, explain why, describe this, describe how, walk me through something. So I want you to remember this phrasing and try to also apply it so that you get good insights and also qualitative insights, and don't use leading questions like, do you like the solution? Or do you think it's amazing solution? That's some of the rookie mistakes that I was making myself when I want to confirm that this is a good prototype or that this is the solution that works. So let's go through some examples of what could questions be for a specific project. And let's take a project of traveling. And let's say you want to discover how discover people's current processes, decision-making about traveling, and how they feel about overall experience. So you could ask, for example, tell me about your last experience booking travel, or how was your experience during the last time you booked travel? Also quite open, but also specific question that leads to good insights. If you want to, for example, learn more about the pain points, the frustrations, the barriers of traveling, you could do example questions like, describe what happened during your last negative experience while booking travel, or positive experience while booking travel. Explain any barriers or frustrations you encountered during your last travel booking experience. So you tap more into what stopped them, what were the barriers, what were the frustrations, and they can talk more directly about that. When you want to, for example, uncover the tools people are using to book travel, more specific examples, you can ask, how do you currently book your travel? or describe your experience when booking travel in, let's say, online or through agent, or in a more specific way that you want to get insights. Or how would you improve booking travel? When you want to, for example, understand what travel means to people and why it's important to them, you can ask questions like, what are some of the reasons you took your last trip? What does travel mean to you? How do you decide where to travel next? It's also more broad questions, and it could lead to many sub questions where you can always say, so why did you do it this way? Or get back to those initial questions that I share. Describe how, or tell me more about it, or walk me through it. And that's, I think, a very good format to lead interviews as well. And when you want to evaluate how people are using your product, website, app, service, you can also ask them to walk you through so that they actually do it. They could share the screen, it could be on phone, it could be live if possible, and just ask how would they do it. Do it live and you observe without, of course, interrupting, and can ask next questions afterwards. And once you gather all these insights, once you gather all this material and you try making sense, I always use this behavioral archetypes methodology. It's similar to personas, but it's a bit different because it focuses on why users are doing it, certain things. So what are the pain points? What do they think? What do they feel? And how do they act in particular situations? And it's also a good simplified way for others to see it, and always refer back to it when you are adding new features, creating new things, iterating it, to have this behavioral archetype in your mind, and always consider it or iterate it as well if something changes. Second method that I wanted to share is usability test. So usability test is more specific type of test where you actually ask participants to perform certain tasks and you observe them when they complete those tasks. It's much more clear, specific, and you design those tasks early in advance. For example, a prototype that you can do in Adobe XD Sketch, and you want to validate if it actually works. So a perfect example where we were thinking about the scheduling functionality in our app, and I made this quick Adobe XD prototype to test if people can find the schedules in the app, if they can create a specific task for this time of the day, and if they achieve it well, and there's something that they didn't understand. And I asked them some follow-up questions if they don't, and use talk loud method as well, that while they do something, they can talk out loud. Oh, I think I should click here. I clicked here. I expected this, but then this happened. And it's a bit of facilitation that we should learn through time. But usability tests are super great way to validate your prototypes and early concepts. And just since I worked with a lot of connected appliances, few examples, there's so many things to test. There's so many things that you can validate. Let's take an oven as an example. So do people understand icon on the oven? Is it easy to open, or do they need to use a lot of strength? How do people set up a timer? How does different light settings affect the quality of the food and perception of how tasty or delicious food it looks like? Um, can people remote control it? Do people even need remote control? What's the grip of the wheel when you turn it and adjust the heating, for example? You can also do benchmarking on other ovens and understand how other people, how other companies are using interfaces, UI, displays, remote control, and compare it as well. So these are all different examples. I just want to say that the testing world and UX research is such a big field, and there's always many things to research, and it's super interesting, at least for me. Third type of test that I wanted to share is called RIDE test. And RIDE test comes from Lean UX methodology, and it stands for Rapid Iterative Testing and Evaluation. So basically, we usually run it in a week time, a few times a year, but I could imagine it perfectly in a mini day or half day concept when you create a prototype, you test it with, let's say, 2 or 3 people, gather insights, and then bring it back to the prototype and fix it, test it again with few people, iterate a prototype. And in this way, like doing it 3, 4 times, you have really improved a lot of things that eventually start making sense, not only for you, but also for the users that you validate the design with. And many times people ask me, so what do you actually change, or what kind of iterations do you make when doing this right test? And it could be everything. It could be UX copy, that is super important part of design, to test how people understand the words, the meaning of things. It could be instructions for the user, so how much in depth you should go with instructions, so how much should you explain, or maybe you don't need to, so you remove it. Many tiny things that come and form the overall experience of your product. And last but not least method is guerrilla testing. This is one of my favorites, where you have a prototype, you have a solution, and you want to gather quick user feedback. So you bring it either to potentially your users, but it could also be family, friends, colleagues, and you can validate simple things if the flow works, if they could achieve the mission successfully and finish the task. So just an inspiration, once I did a guerrilla testing in a train. I was going to a client and that worked with sustainability, and I just talked to some people, like 5 to 6 people, 10 minutes about their sustainable habits, and then I brought it to the client meeting, and I just showed them how important it is to ask people and just show different perspectives of sustainable habits that I got while being on a train. It might sound a bit crazy, but I think that everywhere around us we can do UX research and observe and learn from people and also the behaviors around us. And guerrilla testing also works quite well with paper prototypes. So, for example, if you have an idea and you want to test something, and before building it digitally, it's a good way to even make a quick prototype with color stickers and validate it with some people to get valuable insights from them as well before you invest time in building this beautiful UI design. And going back to initial thing, what I said is that it's very important to think when you do what. So if at the beginning, I think it's super important to talk to a few users to build these behavioral archetypes that you inform about your users. Then maybe if you have some kind of concept already, you can do either guerrilla testing, it could be a paper prototype or something digital. When you build a digital prototype, it's good to run usability test or do write test. So think of which method works the best in terms of what you have at the moment, what you know at the moment, and apply it as well. And this is just an example. It's not like constant truth. You can switch it around as well, but it's just a way of thinking, I think. And then once you actually gather insights, get feedback, let's say do those tests or some kind of interview, so usability test, you get UX research insights. And I really want to address this topic of what is UX research insight. And I think you can all gather some good UX insights for your projects. But let's firstly define and nail down what actually they are. So let's take an example project. And let's say that we want to understand how people decide to move to a new home, the house, the apartment, and the process they go through. So we want to improve our apartment searching platform with this information. And now we're going to go through examples of what is an insight. Let's say I did research. I talked to some people that are moving to new apartment. Okay, how do I communicate to my team a good insight that looks actionable and also is informative? So first example is that good UX research insight is a discovery about human behavior and also the underlying motivations behind that behavior. So a perfect example would be people who are serious about moving will visit at least 5 apartments in 1 month to see what is available and what they could be missing. So there's behavior of what they do, and also there's motivation why they're doing it. And this is all fictive, by the way. So this is just to illustrate it, but it's not based on any platform or anything that actually exists. I just want to illustrate the point and tell you how to form the insights, but don't take this for granted, especially if there's someone designing platforms for booking apartments. This is just an example. Another type of good UX insight is that it should challenge what we believe about users and how they exist in the world. And perfect example could be, although we believed users wanted to see apartments right after they found them online, we uncovered that users wish to have a virtual tour of the apartment before setting up for an in-person appointment. So it challenges our need that, oh, we think they will right away book a session and want to see it. Maybe not. Good UX research insight is also revealing fundamental principles that drive us towards seeing users in a new way. An example of the insight would be users believe real estate agents have essential and unknown information about apartments new to the market, which is impossible for them to get. Without a real estate agent, you aren't getting up-to-date information about new apartments, and real estate agent uses information to their advantage to charge a higher commission. Again, this is quite an in-depth insight, and I like how specific they are and how it also helps to think, okay, how can we address this and how can we solve it in our platform for booking the apartments, and how can we also make agents more trustworthy as well. So I know that one part of your project voting is UX research, and you'll get some points. So I encourage you to find some good UX insights for your project about your users, about the problem that you're solving, and really address it and think about it, because that's what you will be doing as designers, UXers, researchers in the future. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about some general UX research mindset tips that you can take not only for this weekend, but also for the future. And that's something that I learned through quite a few years of being in design and research. And I want to pass it over to you. So why is research mindset or general mindset so important? Well, because just like in good design, you don't just sprinkle some design and some UX on top of it. Research objectives won't surface without work invested in articulating them, and also in being conscious about your mindset towards articulating the research. So first good insight is that you are not the user yourself, and I myself also have to remind myself that I'm not the user, my client's not the users, and we need to really advocate for who the users are in reality. Otherwise, sometimes we build things like this, that the clients will love the solution, but the users will actually see a little bit different perspective of the project. I love this and this funny UX joke that was spreading. Second tip that I wanted to share was active listening. So we should practice active listening, and the less we talk when we actually talk to the users, the more we get to hear from them, and the less opportunity we have to bias the session that we are leading, let's say a user interview or usability test. So practice to not be afraid of silence, not be afraid to wait a few seconds till users maybe are thinking. And this really helps also when you talk with your teammates as well and stakeholders. Curiosity is super important, a never-ending curiosity of the world and the people. As I say, when I go to train, for me, it's like a UX research lab. I observe and I watch people. I want to learn what they're doing, how they travel, and it's super interesting. And that's because curiosity is an essential soft skill for every researcher and designer. Confidence. So confidence is a bit more abstract, but I think as UX researchers and designers, we have to be certain enough to lead research, to approach and challenge decisions, because sometimes it might go at the expense of the user needs, and we can get into the UX depth if we are not confident enough to talk about it, to address those challenges, and state it clearly as well, even though everyone in the room says different things. Collaboration is super important as well. So being UX researcher can sometimes be a lonely job, especially if you are a UX team of one or if you're in a small startup, and you have to find ways to collaborate with others and share the research workload with your team. So many times I do guerrilla testing the family members of my team just to validate it. And this way also make them excited about UX research, and they understand what actually I'm doing or why I want to do UX research, and also feel a bit more connected to UX research and what I do. Perspective is also important. Sometimes we want to champion the user needs, but we also need to accept that we won't win every battle. And even though you're the most amazing researcher designer, sometimes our recommendations won't be implemented. Then that's okay. That's life, and it's not the end of the world, because other time it will be. So be persistent, and also don't get sad if something doesn't happen when you work. And failure is not a dirty word. We learn a lot when we fail, so I encourage you to embrace it as well and fail sometimes. And I love this quote from Andy Lau from Netflix that he said, "I'm never going to be 100% prepared to be a design leader, but I will always be 100% commitment." So it's a lot about how committed you are, to do what you love to do what you're passionate to do, and stick to it, even though you're feeling confident sometimes. And don't hide in the corner. I always say that to designers as well. Your present is the best present. Your presence here in this call. So don't hide in the corner, because sometimes we have this little fear monster inside us that we think is super scary, and that we are afraid to do something. But fear is not our enemy. Fear is our tool. Maybe it says that you're developing, that you're learning, that you're growing as a UX researcher, as a designer. And sometimes it gives you a lot of kind of scary thoughts. Are you sure you want to launch this product? Maybe other people have similar idea. Maybe it doesn't make sense, or maybe there's nothing new in this idea. I would just not share it or not show it, or don't show my process because I didn't do this one step. So I encourage you all to also try to combat these ideas, and don't be afraid of this little monster inside us that is fear. And give yourself permission to be yourself. Embrace yourself and all the weird parts of yourself as a designer and researcher. I think people value authenticity, and I just encourage you all to be yourself when you are a designer and researcher in a company, or as a freelance, or whatever way you choose to build your path. And enjoy the process of what you do. Enjoy your weekend of designathon. So that was all from me. It was very silent, so I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. We do have time for a round of questions and answers. So there are a couple of questions that came up in the chat. And then after we answer these questions for you all, if you have questions at any time, just feel free to drop them in the chat as well so we can get those answered for you. But the first question is, I love the idea that UX design can be continuously optimized. However, there are people who are getting tired of the continuous change of features because they can't follow the updates. How do you think we can resolve this?
That's a very good question. And I agree that sometimes also get tired of, oh, we have to iterate this again or do a quick change, and it feels like it never stops. But I also think it's about finding healthy balance and improving that balance of what are you iterating, what are you changing, what actually is good enough, and talking about it openly with your team. I don't think we should build static products that never change, that just stop and it just dies. I think it's important to iterate and have this cyclical approach to how we design. But the important thing is to find a balance of how often and how much, and that we feel okay with it in the team.
Thank you. That was great. I know a lot of apps, especially like the social apps that I use nowadays, they go through a lot of different updates. Like Instagram, they got rid of like that notifications tab that used to be at the bottom. They replaced it with a shopping tab, and that's been kind of annoying. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like keeping a good balance, both as like a designer and like slash like researcher, and then also thinking about like the user first whenever you're making those iterations and decisions is super important. Another question that we have from Ava is, thank you so much for the talk. Do you have any advice for distancing yourself from bias when you start getting attached to a particular solution/viewpoint?
Also love the question. Actually had a section before in presentation about biases, and I thought, should I talk about it? Because we as researchers, we had quite a lot of biases, I think, or we grow into products, and we also sometimes when we work few years on something, you think you know things, or you think you know your users. And I always encourage people to question those beliefs. And first thing I think is being aware of the biases that exist. For example, there's great, I can send you the link in Slack later, but there's bias cards that you can get online. And it's just basically 52 biases that we as UX researchers face. And I sometimes read through them and just say, okay, framing bias. Okay, this is what it means to frame a question or to lead a question, or confirmation bias. And I read through them and I try to reflect, did it happen to me? Did I actually experience this recently or not? And being aware is the first step. And once you're aware and conscious about it, then I think you can address that and react to it. And also notice it in other people, because then you notice how other people are biased as well. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that. And does anybody else have any other questions? I have a question, if you don't mind answering. So whenever looking at the behavioral archetypes, are those specific for a person that you interviewed, or is it more like general behavioral archetype?
Yeah, it's more general archetype for the type of person that use your product. So for example, I'll give you a very clear example from the robot users, the robot vacuum cleaners users. We have a behavioral archetype that are people that are super geeky about data, information, statistics of what the robot does at their home. And we have this behavioral archetype that I always think, okay, how, when we build the app, how do we address these people that are super geeky about our product? But then we don't forget also this, for example, moms that bought a robot vacuum cleaner to help with the cleaning. And the only thing they do is to press the button. It works, it's simple. They don't care about the rest of the info, statistics, or any analysis. So it's more to consider behavioral archetypes, but it's not a specific person. But when I talk and interview people, individual users, I can start associating in my mind, oh, this person is probably this behavioral archetype from what it tells or what it feels like he's or she's saying. So yeah, that's more general, not individual people.
Thank you. A couple more questions in the chat. What do you do when a user is very shy and they seem to be less inclined to answer your questions?
That happens sometimes. And I usually start to break the ice. Like I like this break ice activities or questions that try to put us on the same line at the beginning. So ask like, oh, firstly, have you ever participated in UX research before, done this? If they say no, then I'm like, okay, I give them more softening at the beginning and ask them um, if they have any questions, explain how it works. I like to calm them down and say that it's a safe space, that they can say everything they feel like. And then if they are shy while we talk, I try to pick up the words that they say. And for example, if you say one phrase, then I repeat it, the phrase, and I think, oh, that's what you said. Can you talk me through about it once more, or tell me more in detail? So I repeat their words, and repeating their words sometimes helps for them to open up and share more. And that's some of the tips that I would say and advise.
Thank you. That totally makes sense, asking those follow-up questions to dig a bit deeper into what they're thinking and their thought processes. Another question from Ava, how do you avoid burnout when you're in these very fast-moving cycles?
I think burnout happens to many designers, and I've been through that too as well. I have a very I have always one-to-ones with my manager and try to address it if I feel this way, and talk to my manager about it first. If I start feeling signals, and there are signals that you can, I think, all identify in ourselves, like maybe you come back home and you think about work, or you think about the solution that you have, or you don't feel that creative, or that you can contribute equally as when you're fresh, you're energized. And I think also observing yourself and being mindful about it is super important. Talking to your manager if you notice it, so that other people that work with you are aware of it and you can address it together, that you're not alone. I think the worst is when you're alone and you don't know how to cope with, and you get into a cycle that is vicious. And for me personally, meditation helps a lot to also be mindful. So I always use Headspace, for example, to in the morning start a day, be conscious, be mindful, and observe myself as well, and the signals that come from within.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your advice to selecting the users for research to reduce bias?
What is my advice to select the users for research? So it really depends. If sometimes I have very specific criteria of the users that I want to interview. And that's more, okay, I want, let's say, humidify users between this and this age to validate some assumption. And sometimes I keep it super open and I just say, I just want anyone that has a humidifier or that has any connected product at home to talk to them. So I would say it's still work in progress that I'm trying to learn how to avoid bias. I don't try to stereotype. This is the age of users that use our products. I don't put age limits, for example, so that I don't put bias for myself of who are the users using our product, or anything in terms of, for example, education. I also try to include everyone. It doesn't matter if you work in this job or that job, or your age is that and that. I try to be very open and inclusive, uh, and only do exclusion if I really need to do research with specific group of people. Let's say moms with kids that are in Bangkok and they live in an apartment that is 50 square meters. That then I would go deep and I would have a screener criteria, and I would just research those users because I need to, and I have it as an objective as well. Mm.
Thank you. So, oh, another question. Can you explain more about behavioral design?
Can I explain more about behavioral design? I think we need 2 more hours for this then. But behavior design is, it's a fascinating world for me. And it's a very broad question, so it's hard for me now in my mind to narrow down what exactly about behavioral design to focus on. But um, one important thing that I always mention when people ask about behavioral design and why it's interesting for me is because in our brain in general as humans we have two systems, system one and system two. And system one is rational thinking, or like when you buy a house you use that system, you calculate everything, you check, you do a lot of research. But then there's system one that is irrational, unconscious, it's more quick decisions, quick shortcuts. And the truth is that 98% of our daily decisions are taken by this irrational system. And that's very important to consider, that decisions that we make, we don't use rational thinking many times. It comes to shortcuts, it comes through our shortcuts that brain makes when we want to do something. And it's very important to understand that in design, because we think that users will invest time in reading this or that, or uh, check everything and they'll be super interested. But at the end, our attention span is shorter than a goldfish nowadays.
Thank you. Tina asked a question. Are there any interesting distinctions that you see between designing for software, such as apps and websites, and appliances like the ones you work on your company?
Yeah, I think there's super big difference. Like when you design appliance, usually the timeline is 2 years ahead, and there's you really need to know, okay, and have solid explanation of why is this button there, what's the depth of this button, what it does, what's the icon, and because you will not be able to change it. That product will launch, and it will probably be okay. Maybe there will be a new version in a few years, but it's super important to nail it down much more deeply. Whether in the digital product design, I always say we are allowed to make mistakes and we are allowed to fix it. And sometimes we do, and it's much more iterative, fast, quick, and I love building digital products because of that, because there's no perfect solution. There's solution that you continuously iterate, work on, and as long as you care about iterating it and fixing it and not leave it hanging for the users that cannot use it or do something, then you're on the right path.
Yeah, thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the people here? I have one last question. I know
Yeah.
you've given a couple of different book recommendations, and I'm always looking for more design books. I want to go on like a design and like product book splurge soon. So, are there any specific book recommendations that you have? Either it can be like on UX research or like design as a whole.
Mm-hmm. I love books, so it's a great topic. I would recommend my favorite book last year that I read was Ruined by Design by Mike Montero, because it talks about how design can sometimes ruin things, and it also reflects on this idea of um, like what is your responsibility as a designer and what is your role as a designer in this world, and it explains it with super many examples. So I love that book. I would recommend it. um, there's many great books by A Book Apart. I don't know if you know this book series, A Book Apart, that they talk about the UX research, accessibility. I can find a link and share it here in comments. But they have many great design books. So this is what I would recommend. So
Thank
here.
you. We had a few different questions pop up. Um, what is the purpose of behavioral design, and how does data design get applied on behavioral design?
Mm-hmm. What is the purpose of behavioral design? Um, to understand how we humans think, and it has to do a lot of psychology and things that we probably don't say but we do, or what's happening in our brain. And that's the importance of it. And also behavioral design is a big superpower to have for designers in a both positive and negative way, because if you know a lot, you can also manipulate and have a lot of dark patterns because you know that it would work. So that's why I always say it's dangerous to know a lot about behavioral design, and that's where sometimes dark patterns come from. But it's also a very positive thing because then you can nudge people. Behavioral design is a lot about how you nudge people without them noticing it, but there is a conscious decision why you design product this way, and that you want to lead the person towards a desired behavior that you're trying to build or affect or change or impact. Yeah, and I didn't get the part of the data science. I'm sorry. What was the does data science get applied on behavioral design, right? I'm not sure I can answer this question, or I would know how to answer. The Yeah, I wouldn't know how to answer if there's data science applied on behavioral design. There's a lot of data and stats and information about behavior. Um, and I'm sure there are companies that have a lot of data science applied to behavioral design. I worked more on it on qualitative level, so more trying to understand, read, use some methods and methodologies in behavioral design and apply it within my work, especially when nudging for sustainable behavior and sustainability. That's where you apply behavioral design a lot, because it's a difficult change to make for people in their minds and also in the habits that they have nowadays. So I would investigate that area as well and maybe see, and maybe I can come back to you. I see the name who wrote it and get back to the question. Yeah.
Thank you so much for all of your insight and advice on how to pursue design research. Yeah, I also saw that. How do you pronounce it? Is it Sangumin?
Sangumin, I also see.
Okay, yeah, I saw that you were studying neuroscience and behavior, and that's also what I'm majoring in college. A book that I read a couple of years ago is called Subliminal. I think it was like pretty popular, and it's not like specifically design related, but it's more on the like psychology side, but still super relevant, especially for this topic. It goes into a lot about how we think that we're rational human beings, but in reality, we're not. Whenever making decisions, we act more on like emotions and like those like subconscious feelings that we may have but not necessarily be aware of. So I definitely recommend check that out too. It's a pretty like relatively quick read. It's like this thick. So
Nice. I didn't hear about this one. Thank you so much. It's nice to recommend each other. It would be amazing to start a book club here, I see, and learn together.
Yeah. So are there any last questions before we close out?
I just wanted to mention I will be on Slack as well. I'm connected. So if you have any follow-ups or any questions or ideas, also feedback as well. Like I would love to hear if you enjoyed the session and if it was useful. And if there's any questions you have about UX research for your project, feel free to drop me a message as well.
Thank you so much again, Vaida, for giving us this presentation and sharing all of your work. And of course, all the book recommendations too that we've received like 4 of them, I think, so far. So thank you so much again for spending the time with us. And thank you to everyone who is here and listened in. We really appreciate having everyone here. And this recording will be available internally on our Slack channel, and we'll also email it to the participants as well. So thank you everyone again. Hope you all have a great
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I hope it was a good session and you enjoyed it.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much. We did have a question also about the slides.
Uh-huh.
They were wondering if we could or if they could get like the slides from the presentation too.
Mm-hmm. Would it be like a part of the video as well? Or the actual slide? I usually never send my presentation because it's like more like not copyright, but I put a lot of work into them. So I always say like I like people using them. I'm always an inspiration, but